And the more options you have, probably, law of averages at least, you're going to be able to choose the best one. And that's going to make your final product better. Well, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Wednesday Directed Writing Group. Today is not Wednesday, it's Monday. So we're having a makeup session for holidays. Ariel and Cece are both traveling. So joining us today are Kimberly and Justin. We're going to start with our traditional greeting and maybe a holiday story recommendation from Kim.
All right. So I am Kimberly. I write from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my story recommendation, I mean, it's a tried and true and everyone knows it, but it's Home Alone for me. Like that story, I can't recommend it. It's just so perfect and wonderful, and I absolutely love it. So Home Alone and Home Alone 2 is mine.
You've captured the spirit of the day because Saturday Night Live had a Home Alone skit on Saturday. Did you see it? Yeah. All right. I liked it. I mean, my favorite sketches involve blood, but that's all the spoiler I will give. And Justin.
Hey. Okay, one of my favorite Christmas movies is a bit of an indie one. It's called Anna and the Apocalypse. And it is as silly as it sounds, it is a comedy. Christmas is a Christmas zombie movie musical. And it is fantastic. I have a DVD of it, but only because I found it in like a bargain bin at a store once, and I was so excited to find it. So if you can find it anywhere, I love it, but it's very, very silly.
Great, Justin. Unfortunately, mine does not fit the Christmas theme. I'm going to recommend a book that was recommended to me. It is called We Are Legion, in parentheses, We Are Bob. You guys heard of that one? It's a lot like Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's a lot like Murderbot because it is it's the main character in a situation, and it just follows exploits somewhat episodically. The main thing I found appealing, and this should teach you a valuable lesson, is it is about an old curmudgeon who died and was resurrected as a disembodied AI put into a von Neumann probe. You can see why it was appealing to me. Anyway, I read all 5 books over the weekend, and I really liked it. So there's a lesson there. Please your audience, I guess.
Are all of the books Murderbot like length, or are they longer?
No, they're a lot longer. What was interesting was the 4th book was twice as long as the first 3, and then the 5th book went back to the same length. But I'm guessing they're about 100,000 words each. So the first one was a full-length novel. It was successful, so I'm guessing that's how books 2 through 5 came about. It's a nice lesson in obsession, because once I read the first book, I could not read the remaining books in the series. All right, well, thank you for that. And again, happy holidays. Today we have a little bit of a disjuncture, but I want to present another background talk, which I think is going to frame the discussion for both of your selections for today. And our title is A/B testing for authors. So you've heard of A/B testing, yes? Good. So I'm not going to encourage you to do A/B testing directly. Instead, the purpose of today's talk is to get you to expand and somewhat alter the way you think about writing. So I was hesitant to say this, but it's an attitude adjustment. The way many writers work that we've observed is that they want perfection, or they think there's just one right way to do this, and then they struggle to try to come up with that right way. Here's the thing about Bardsy. One of our favorite slogans is writing is not a struggle. right? If you're struggling, something's going wrong. So, anecdote, one of our contest winners burst into tears upon Alex and I congratulating her on winning the contest. I thought they were tears of joy. Turned out she was upset that now she had to go back and keep working on this novel, which she completed a first chapter of. And I don't know, we had a long discussion following that. Struggle, tears, pain, agony is not the path to success, right? You have to sustain your effort. And I think this is a different way of approaching writing that is going to involve a lot less struggle. And then secondly, we're going to talk a little bit about how to gather feedback to inform the kinds of choices you're making for your projects. And then finally, this is all about our common goal, our perennial goal, which is to boost, in this case, your efficiency, most importantly, your confidence, making the right, having a sense that you're making the right choices as you work on your novels. And then finally, of course, product improvements. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background, which is, why do people A/B test? I don't know if you remember, but this was my expertise. I got my training in graduate school on message testing, so I've thought a lot about this. And I guess ultimately it boils down to this. You have a decision to make. Whenever you're creating something, you're trying to please someone, you're trying to send messages, right? You either are going to send the message this way or that way. And that's where the A/B comes from. Should I use message A or message B? And this applies across the board, right? Anytime you try to do something, you're going to figure out what works better and what works not so well. And the idea is there's two ways to make this decision, right? You can either try to intuit what the best way is, or you could test. And somewhere when the internet was being born, A/B testing passed into the popular culture as a way of figuring out what the best website was, or in a broader sense, what the best message was. And then I guess it reached its apex, probably past its apex, because the apex was with Meta, right? Facebook. And pay-per-click, right? Which ad is going to be the best? And then there was so much data on the ads that you could easily see that this ad A was working much better than this ad B, because it was getting more clicks. Then by extension, YouTube and Amazon, etc. They adopted this mentality of we have an OKR, some kind of outcome measure, a performance metric. Most cases it was number of clicks, number of viewers, what have you. And then that was taken to be the right answer, right? The one that did the best was correct, or the best message, as opposed to intuition, right? I have a feeling this is going to work. I'm going to stick with that. So to me, those are the two poles. And they're the same poles for novelists, right? Either you sort of intuit and that this is the right way to either develop or to transmit my story, or you do some kind of testing. Now, it's the way we have to approach writing is a lot looser, right? So I'm going to back off from A/B testing and talk a little bit about it from the standpoint of trial and error. Right? So the comparison, or the opposition here, is between intuition on the one hand and then trial and error on the other. Now, we need another disclaimer, right? Does this apply to novels? This notion that you can trial and error your way through it. Just for point of reference, a lot of MFA instructors and that we talked to early on when we were setting up our program, we're just called bullshit on this, right? Novels are unique. Novels are subjective. There's no way to provide consistent feedback. There's no way to tell if one novel's better than another one, right? We heard this over and over again, and I just fundamentally disagree with this, right? And the reason why is some notion of pragmatism, right? You are going to have to make choices when you write. And some of them, by definition, have to be better than others. Now, at a gross level, the way you can think about it is you're literally comparing novel A to novel B. And we do this all the time, right? There's nothing abnormal about doing that. And you finish reading the two novels and you're going to like one of them better. Now, at a higher level, you're going to find some classic. I don't know. For me, it's always Dune, but maybe for you, it's Jane Austen or Dostoevsky, right? That's going to be better in some large sense than a little crappy novel that is not as good, right? And then as you bear down into that, you can get more fine-grained, right? Which Jane Austen novel is your favorite? Which science fiction novel is your favorite? The point is that we make these kinds of judgments all the time. And even if you're the most a writing coach or instructor who's wedded to this idea of uniqueness and subjectivity, you're still making these judgments, right? A student, a writer gives you a selection or gives you a novel and you make comments. Where are those comments coming from? Arguably, they come from an ideal notion of what a novel should look like in that person's head, right? So that person is making comments based on what they think will improve the novel. Otherwise, what's the point, right? And once they take that step of making comments with a notion that the comments are going to improve the novel, then they, perhaps without knowing it, fall within this A-B framework. And to get down to the heart of the issue, we're not really looking at A-B. What we're looking at is A versus A star, right? My novel now, A, versus my novel if I make changes, A star. So the presumption whenever someone's making comments, or when you're thinking about it yourself, we'll get into that, is that the novel now is not as good as it could be. And therefore, we are doing some kind of trial and error. Now, however, by itself, trial and error doesn't get you very far. We had one person, I was going to ask you to do a Brooklyn accent, Justin. Can you do one off the top of your head? Imagine you're calling and telling me that you can't enter the contest because it won't accept your credit card. We'll see how you do. So we're role playing a tech support call. You got to unmute yourself.
Who is this?
Did I get
a little
bit smarter at the beginning. Hi, this is Bardsy Technical Support. What's the problem?
Oh, hey, so here's the thing. So, I can't really do this because, I can't, my credit card is not really working right now. Does that make sense? Are we talking at the same speed right now?
You're good. Sir, do you have a debit card?
Yes, yeah, I got one. Okay. But it's not really, above water right now,
All right. Well, just tell me so I'm going to fast forward. Tell me your debit card number. I'll enter it. You'll be in our anthology contest with your first chapter. And then we're going to send you feedback. And you say, feedback? Why do I need feedback?
Oh, you wait. Okay. Feedback? Why do I need feedback?
Exactly. If you don't like my story, I'll just send you another one. I've got hundreds.
You don't like my story? I'll send you another one. I got hundreds.
Exactly. Right. This is not.
This happened?
This actually happened to me. That's not the way we want to write. We want to produce a first draft, a concept, whatever. We get feedback. There's better and worse ways to do that. And then we improve the story, right? We go from A to A star. So that's what I mean by intelligent, right? Trial and error isn't just throwing as many first chapters at our contest to see which one is going to win the grand prize. So the claim this guy made was, well, the odds are 40-1. I can keep trying until I get a winner. So this was not pulls on a slot machine or tosses of the dice tosses at the craps table. This is a way of moving from what you have and iterating it so it gets better and better until, yes, you either win the contest, you publish, whatever your goal is. So that's why I call it intelligent. And the basis for intelligent trial and error is to make good comparisons. I was going to talk a little bit about comparisons old and new. Just off the top of my head, the Wright brothers not only invented an airplane, right, but they were more famous for inventing something else. I mean, their airplane design is, passé, but one thing they invented is still used in almost the same exact form today, and that is the wind tunnel, right? Essentially just a big fan blowing over a aerodynamic surface. And what they did was they built this contraption. Why? So they could test various wings, right? And they figured out which wing made the plane go up and then which wing did not make the plane go up. And that's it, right? You figure out what it is you want to accomplish, and then you go about trying to test it. So I used to test advertising, right? And so we would have one ad versus another ad, and we would try to figure out which one worked. And if you expand that, comparison now involves millions, if not trillions of views, right? You look at ads on Meta or Google, search ads or whatever Meta's doing, Facebook is doing these days. That's all it is. You use one ad versus another one. You have some kind of metric, usually how much money or profit a particular ad entails, return on some acronym. And by doing that, Google, large tech companies figure out which ad to show you at a given time. It's all based on it's based on one single thing. What ad is going to make Google more money? And then they throw every single bit of information at that. They track the results constantly. Same thing with Instagram, right? What post should I show to this reader, viewer, user? That's the way our society works. Good or ill, right? And arguably what makes it a good comparison is all the background information that these tech companies have on you allows them to interpret the results and then integrate those results in the ad they show the next person. So the system is getting better and better at showing the next person a particular ad. And if you want to see an extended version of this argument, you can check out our social media primer, because the same thing works in terms of Facebook pages and in terms of Instagram posts. And for us, it also determines the sequence of things you'll see on Amazon. Pace, whatever kind of payola Amazon is taking for a particular book. All right. So good comparison such that you have a level playing field between two options, and then that comparison feeds into the next comparison, feeds into the next one, and so on. So you keep getting closer and closer to your goal. The other issue is what to test, right? And there's two concerns here. The first concern is ethical, right? The most famous, one of the most famous questions in developmental psychology is nature versus nurture, right? Is it in our genes or is it in the way we're brought up? And the obvious way to answer this are twin studies. It used to be if you had a twin, you could get a nice paycheck to enroll them in one of these twin studies, and they would track the twins' development throughout whatever. I've seen twin studies that go up to the age of 60 or 70 years old. Now, it turns out it's a wonderful study, except for one thing. What? It can't really answer the nature versus nurture question. Why? Because you can't subject one twin to abuse and leave the other twin with a nice, happy, nurturing environment and compare the two results, right? It's just unethical. And so that puts a limitation on the kinds of questions a twin study can answer. And closer to home, right, we're writing a novel. So a true A/B test, what would the outcome be? Well, it would be number of books sold. So you write one novel and then you write the same novel in a slightly different way. You have your point of comparison. We'll talk about that in a second. And you figure out which one sells more books. Not realistic, right? Now, Amazon and sort of evil AI spammer floppers kind of do that, right? They present 15 or 100 versions of a novel with different titles, maybe different cover art, and they see which one is more attractive. Now, that is an evil practice, right? So let's push that off to the table. But for us as authors, we're not going to produce 2 to 10 novels and subtly alter the characteristics of each and figure out which one sells more. So we have to be a little bit more adaptive when we're doing our trial and error. And then finally, we need to think about outcome. I just mentioned one, which is number of books sold, right? But it's prohibitively expensive and somewhat unethical for us to try to spam Amazon with books to figure out how we're going to maximize our sales. So we need to step back a little bit and figure out another outcome that is going to substitute for number of books sold and be a kind of proxy that is going to lead us in the direction of selling more books, as opposed to just using that as our, we call it a dependent variable, or we can call it an outcome measure. So what then could we use as outcome measures? And I will propose that there are 3. We talked about book sales already. The one I want to focus on for us and what Bardsy sort of specialize in is feedback in the form of spontaneous retelling. So we haven't produced any videos on this yet, but the idea is you allow someone, hopefully someone in your genre, hopefully it's their first exposure to this particular project, to read your work and then spontaneously retell it. And that has innumerable advantages. But, you know, that's not our topic for today. But what we're looking for in that instance, in terms of trial and error, A/B testing, is what sequence or what word choice, what kind of emphases in a particular chapter leads to the kind of retelling I want as an author. Today, I wanted to focus on another potential outcome, which, for lack of a better label, I'm calling self-satisfaction, right? I'm going to tell or write my story this way, and then I'm going to try to tell it or write it a different way, and I'm going to see which one is more satisfying to me. Or, as you'll see later on in today's session, which one is more satisfying to this local audience, right? My reader proxies. And I think this gets you a long way. It will help you. And I think I just want to point out one particular implication of thinking about trying out different things and satisfying either yourself or your local audience. And I'm calling this attitudinal impact, right? First thing it does is thinking about writing this way in terms of testing out different choices and assessing their impact, is it changes the way you think about your writing. It forces you to focus on your reader. And I can't underline how important that is. Too many times we hear, well, I'm just writing for myself, and if the reader likes it, great. Now, usually that's kind of a code, kind of a hedge. I am writing for myself, I like it, and if no one likes it, it's on them. Kind of an abdication of responsibility, if you put it that way. But in a more positive sense, when we recognize that we are writing for the reader, and this kind of trial and error encourages us to think that way, we're going to produce better work. Now, perhaps may not be as artsy or whatever, beautifully worded or literary, but it's going to do better, right? It's going to sell. And then you could extend that to say things like, well, just because you think it's artsy and literary doesn't necessarily mean the audience does. And more importantly, it doesn't necessarily mean they are satisfied by it. And then the second thing I think it does is it makes us conscious of the idea of choice. Everyone sort of gestures in this direction. Oh, it's important to make choices, right? But we really don't do that, or at least I haven't observed people doing that in the act of writing. What usually happens is you try to make one choice and then craft that approach to perfection. I want to change the way we're thinking about writing, especially at the story developmental level, but it also encompasses all the other levels down to word choice, word sequence, and emphasis, right? It is the idea that you can substitute many, many different options whenever you're approaching your particular work. So we're going to preview, we're going to talk about the peak of Justin's story, right? Should I go this way or that way? That's a choice, right? For Kim, we're trying to figure out something about what the resolution is, more accurately, where the resolution is going to be placed. Should the resolution come earlier and then I have sort of a postscript, or should I flip it around and have, I guess it's a prescript, right? But should the postscript come earlier and then the resolution be tied up more closely to that? Right? Those are the kinds of choices we're talking about at the highest level. And when you realize that they're choices, it's going to take a huge load off you, right? It's not so much that I have to get this right. You do kind of have to get it right, but it's not that I have to formulate it perfectly. It's that I have to choose each one and then see which one is working best. And that is a much less burdensome approach to writing. And I think you're going to have less emotional carnage when you think about writing that way. And it's going to be less of a struggle. And I also think it's going to improve your outcomes, right? When we stick to one path and then we do our darndest to make sure that path works in our book, it forecloses all the other options that we have available. Can't remember what the exact saying is. You could probably help me. But it's good acting is making choices, right? And I would argue it's the same for any art. Take Michelangelo, or my favorite guy is J.M.W. Turner. I went to this exhibit at the Getty that I love talking about. The nice thing about this exhibit was they had his sketchbook available. And so every time he had a masterpiece, right below the masterpiece was all the little sketches he did to prepare for painting this masterpiece. So should the boat, this famous painting had like a boat in the ocean with a sail. And then he did little options. Should the boat face this way? Should the boat face this way? Should the sail be square? Should the sail be triangular? Should the boat be pitching down? Should it be pitching up? Well, all these things were ideas that he was trying out before and while he was conceptualizing this masterpiece. So the work that came out was the result of all figuring out which of these options was going to make it into the final piece. And then the final thing that I think this does for you is it tells you what's the most important thing about writing. Perhaps not the most important, but a really important thing about writing is to generate a ton of options, right? This is creativity. One of the most important facets of creativity, at least, which is think about all the options that you could bring to the table. And the more options you have, probably, law of averages at least, you're going to be able to choose the best one. And that's going to make your final product better. So, and it's a kind of exercise we do all the time. Your character's facing a decision, right? You have to construct that decision to create empathy and advance your story. But, what are the realm of possibilities here? There's a reason why people who play Dungeons and Dragons and similar role-playing games tend to do better at writing these kind of genre novels. It's because they're used to generating these options on the fly, right? Especially if they've been running the game. And that just improves your work dramatically, right? Instead of sort of plotting, I know this is kind of prejudicial language, but instead of plotting along a particular path, you get option A, option B, option C. We could go this way, we go that way. And encouraging that kind of creativity by forcing yourself to generate as many options as possible every time you face a creative challenge is going to produce better work. And if you can't see this, what we're really doing here by thinking about us in terms of trial and error is we are welcoming inspiration, right? Again, referring back to that unfortunate person who was not happy that she won one of our anthology contests, right? She didn't want to work on this novel anymore. She wanted it to go away. But we don't want that, right? We don't want just to maintain that plotting notion and just add words to our word count every day until we reach 100,000 words and can hit publish or whatever. What we want to do is see our writing, especially at the highest levels, as a kind of interactive development process where we're constantly evaluating what we've accomplished and reevaluating in terms of coming up with something better at every choice juncture. And so when inspiration strikes, you should be happy, right? Here's a better option. Here's a better choice, an A star to the kind of A that I already have. And I think bottom line is when you put yourself into this intelligent trial and error mindset, it's going to make your life a lot easier, right? It reduces the burden on you. It's more efficient. And I also strongly believe it's going to produce better work. So any questions from our present crowd? Feel free. All right.
Bardsy delivers the tools, guidance, and support you need to produce compelling novels. Our well-researched and thoroughly tested approach includes our minimum complete story, a 90-second exercise that keeps your writing on track while fueling creativity, Bardsy Publishability Index, a 23-dimension checklist that offers attainable goals and provides actionable feedback, and our brand new comprehensive character developer that helps you construct unforgettable characters. Come see for yourself at Bardsy.com today. Try our workshop or enter our first chapter contest. Then, when you're ready, Elite Membership delivers writing groups, personal coaching, and a curated community. With Bardsy, your work will captivate everyone, from agents to publishers, and, most importantly, your readers.